Summer of 2019 marked the beginning of a brand new era for the long-time running series Ninjago, Masters of Spinjitzu. With a new animation studio backing the popular franchise, the writers decided to give the show a soft reboot to introduce new fans who were just getting into it. Secrets of the Forbidden Spinjitzu was this gateway season to the newer series, and it was met with a lot of mixed reviews from the community. A lot of folks strongly disliked the newer 11-minute episode format and felt that the season had way too much filler and didn't give enough focus to the main story. Both of the villains introduced were also met with extreme skepticism, and the characterization of the ninja was described as inaccurate and childish. As a Ninjago fan myself, I felt very alone in my feelings towards this season when it first aired. I was completely on board with this fresh perspective, and the adventure and mystery Season 11 quickly built marked it as one of my favorite seasons from the franchise as a whole. Today, I'm going to be discussing all of the main criticisms I've observed others make from this season, and give my take on why I think this season works so well. Ready for me to change your mind? Here we go. Okay, let's start things off with the fire chapter. First of all, I think the ninja getting complacent and lazy in the beginning of this season here is a completely justifiable action for them. Let me explain. They were fresh off the heels of defeating the series' penultimate villain, the Oni. For seasons 8 through 9, things were pretty much non-stop action for them. In a month's time, they battled the SOG, lost control of the city, got banished to another realm they had to fight their way through, only to face off against Garmadon once they got back, and then quickly dealt with an almost unstoppable force in the Bringers of Doom. After surviving multiple catastrophic events from back to back to back, their confidence was at an all-time high, and their energy was at an all-time low. And what does that breed? Complacency. Now, a lot of people take issue with how the actual arc was handled. The idea of the ninja sitting in a hot tub, snacking, and playing video games seemed very goofy and immature as a concept, but my retort is, isn't that how the ninja have always been? When they don't have the weight of the world on their shoulders, they are just teenagers at the end of the day, like everyone else. They've earned the right to goof around in my eyes. Looking back to Season 1, there are plenty of examples that hint at this idea of laziness in the ninja. In fact, it's a main theme that the show starts off with in the beginning. The ninja get too comfortable after their victory against Garmadon and the Skeleton Army, and decide to lounge around, eat pizza, and play video games to celebrate. Sound familiar? It's just like the beginning of Season 11. I think the idea of starting off Season 11, which was supposed to be a soft reboot for the franchise, with a very similar theme to Season 1, was a really smart choice. This is a story that wants us to get reacquainted with the characters before it fully delves into the story, and I, for one, really appreciate that. Letting all of the ninja play off of each other without any sort of imposing threat is something we really haven't seen much of before, and I genuinely think it's a ton of fun because of how playful and ridiculous our beloved heroes can get. This is the penultimate version of what would happen if they went unchecked. Wu understands the consequences that have come from their negligence before, so he decides that the team has rested enough, quickly snaps them out of their funk, and that's where our story truly begins. The reason I think this idea works so well is because the ninja are essentially a blank slate for the beginning of this new era. We, the viewer, get to experience their development as they familiarize themselves with combat and adventure once more. Episode 2, Questing for Quests, is hated almost as much as the pilot for this season. A lot of people saw it as filler, but for me personally, I saw it as a way to fully communicate just how out of shape the ninja are after Wu snaps them out of their funk, and it really builds stakes for what we all know is coming. Some sort of threat is looming in the background, and this team is clearly nowhere near ready for it. Plus, we get the return of the fan-favorite character, the Commissioner, as well as some world building for life in the streets of Ninjago, and the episode ends with an introduction to this aforementioned threat in the form of an ancient pyramid, just begging to be explored by our heroes. A rocky start marks the beginning of this new quest, and the ninja get their first shot at facing off against danger. And it's not an exaggeration when I say that things don't go too well. A large scarab attacks the team, disables their vehicles, and strands them in the middle of the desert. They're forced to think creatively, and after what I consider to be an all-timer joke from the show.
Guys, you're both too valuable to risk. It should be someone expendable, like Jay.
What?
The ninja do what they do best. and find a wacky and over-the-top way of defeating the beetle and escaping with their lives. Upon their arrival at the pyramid, we're greeted with yet another controversial plot point in this season, the return of Clutch Powers. This was a beloved character introduced in his own film back in 2010. His character was known for his charm, decisiveness, and eagerness to explore. Clutch had been referenced all the way back in Season 5 of Ninjago, but this was his first time appearing in the flesh. Clutch is essentially an extremist version of what the ninja were at the beginning of the season. Smug, lethargic, and in need of a serious kick in the butt to get him moving. This version of Clutch is a lot different from what we had seen in the movie 9 years prior, but I think it's safe to say that anyone can change in 9 years' time, including an adventurer as great and seasoned as Clutch Powers. He had spent a good majority of his life chasing adventure and riches, and now that he had his fair share of it, he had grown tired of constantly putting his life on the line. I think this is an entirely fair thing to do from his perspective, and I think it serves as an interesting dynamic between him and the ninja. A lot of the fame, riches, and spoils from his adventures clearly went to his head. It's kind of like the ninja if they had remained in their passive state much longer. It's entirely possible that they could have ended up like him. I'm looking at you, Kai. Either way, Clutch's main goal here is to serve as one of the catalysts for the inception of this conflict. He helps guide the ninja through the pyramid, and together, they accidentally unleash a powerful sorceress by the name of Asphira. And cue controversial plot point number 3 or 4? I've lost count already. Asphira is perhaps the most criticized aspect of this entire season. Her character is driven by her yearn for revenge, and if you didn't catch that at first, she'll make sure to remind you through her dialogue at least 100 more times. She felt that she was the only one who had the guts to play dirty. She easily defeats King Mumbo after Wu teaches her Spinjitzu, and quickly turns a very peaceful kingdom into one hell-bent on conquering others. Her greatest flaw, however, is underestimating Wu. To fix his mistake, he himself uses a forbidden fighting technique and plays dirty to take her down. She had done Wu a favor by releasing him from prison earlier, and in exchange, she expected his righteous soul to give her the key to vanquishing her enemies. Her vanity and lust for power is what ultimately causes her downfall, and thanks to Wu, she's sealed inside a pyramid for 1,000 years as punishment. If I were a self-conceited, violent narcissist like Asphira, I too would be incredibly angry at Wu for my defeat. You released him, and then he goes and imprisons you. The first Spinjitzu master and his family had ruled this land on the virtues of trust and honesty, and Wu completely betrayed those beliefs. I think from a motive standpoint alone, Asphira's qualms are completely justified. I will admit, though, her actual portrayal does leave a bit to be desired. I wish they had given her just a little more development outside of the whole thirst for revenge against Wu, because it really makes her character feel one-dimensional. That, and the fact that she says the word revenge at least 1,000 times throughout the course of this season. Something with Asphira that I think works really well, however, is her dynamic with Char. Like I mentioned earlier, she's a self-conceited, violent narcissist, and blending that personality with a loyal servant like Char is hilarious. He's constantly at her disposal, always asking how he can help serve her. Naturally, Asphira could care less about Char's well-being, and is clearly bothered by even his mere presence, but she of course keeps him around because of his servitude, and I love how she constantly puts him in harm's way, hoping that something will happen to him to further her thirst for revenge. What makes this dynamic work really well is that it never feels too over-the-top and goofy. Think back to Blanc and Ragamonk, who stumble around and constantly mess with the affairs of their masters, and yet are still kept around. I still think "the moon was in our eyes" is one of the worst lines of dialogue in the entire show, but that's a Hands of Time issue. We're not talking about that today. Char differs from Blanc and Ragamonk because he's not incompetent. Dumb and a little goofy, yes, but not incompetent. He can still fight and do his job. After this, we get what many of you would call a filler episode. I personally call it a side quest. The News Never Sleeps brings back a fan-favorite character in Nelson and introduces us to a new one with Antonia. It's simply delightful catching up with the Purple Ninja, whom, let me remind you, we haven't seen in 3 years. He's grown just a bit since we last saw him, and is in that stage of light where his voice is squeaking with every other sentence he throws out. Absolutely hilarious stuff. Hats off to this voice actor for portraying this stage of a teenager's life perfectly. What this episode here does well is give a ground's eye view of what it's like to just be a normal person in the world of Ninjago. One minute you're reading the newspaper, and the next there's a giant robotic samurai fighting fire snakes in the street. It pokes a little bit of fun at the absurdity and repetition of the concept itself, but Nelson's character keeps all of this stuff grounded in reality, and he really gives it an emotional core. And, if you didn't know, Antonia is actually based off of a real-life fan of the show. She wrote to Brent Miller while chronically ill, asking him to find a way to get her into the show. Her wish was thankfully granted, as the incredible Tommy Andreasen heard of the story and immediately began working on a way to include her into the script. I honestly have no clue what ended up happening to the actual girl herself. I know that last we heard she didn't have much time left, but my prayers go out to her and her family, and I sincerely hope she got to see herself in the show. Moving on to the next episode, the ninja are caught in yet another array of antics. They're all chained together, Kai is unconscious, and the temple they're currently trapped inside is quickly filling up with lava. Just another day in Ninjago, right? Now, for those who aren't aware, there's a very vocal group of folks out there who hate this episode as well for one singular reason: a line of dialogue uttered by Jay. Whilst reading Clutch Power's book on surviving booby traps, Jay comes across a de-stressing tactic to use if in danger. Simply utter the phrase, "Bro, bro, goo goo! Bro, bro, goo goo!" and it will assist in calming the individual, at least according to Clutch. Jay continues to use this line for the rest of the episode, with the team constantly getting annoyed by its stupidity, until the end of the episode, when their end seems imminent, they all mumble the line together before being saved by Pixel. I'll admit that the joke itself is quite childish, but doesn't that fit Jay's personality well? He's always been known for being a goofball, and this joke seems perfectly in line with that, at least to me. I don't really understand the negative discourse around this one. However, I very much understand a lot of the negative discourse around Episode 8, Snake-tastrophe. This episode is centered around delivering an entirely different POV of the Pyro Viper's attack, this time in the form of a news broadcast. I'll admit it's nice to see Gale gossip again. She's a character we haven't seen much of since her appearance in Season 2, same with Dareth. However, the rest of the episode mainly focuses on different brands in Ninjago delivering commercials for this news broadcast, except each of them keeps getting cut off by the attack. Usually each ad ends in something catching on fire from the snakes. First off, I want to bring attention to the fact that every single commercial you've ever seen on TV has been pre-recorded and signed off on by many, many people before it ever sees the light of day on your screen. So delivering live commercials on air is something that just doesn't happen, period. Aside from the obvious inaccuracy, the idea of a live commercial just makes things too over-the-top goofy in my opinion, because so much can go wrong. Seeing the citizens run around screaming and cracking jokes in the middle of an attack really robs it of any seriousness in my eyes. To be fair, this video here is in defense of Season 11, so obviously I'm going to be pointing out lots of positives, but I wanted to quickly let you all know that I'm not blind to the idea of criticizing things, and that's why I'm going so hard on Episode 8 here. When there's a problem, I'm still going to point it out. But let's talk about the good things in this episode. Perhaps the most important aspect is that, despite it being a filler episode, it still provides a couple of key plot points to keep the story moving forward. It introduces us to the concept of the treacherous deceiver, a mysterious figure that wronged Asphira, and one that she desperately wants to get revenge against. We also learn of her plan to learn forbidden spinjitzu, with one of the scrolls being held at the Ninjago Museum of History. With this knowledge in mind, Asphira and her goons head off in search of the scroll, with the ninja not far behind. Powerless is the following episode, and it begins to build on Kai's character arc this season. After losing his elemental powers to Asphira, he struggles with feelings of uselessness, so he stays behind as the ninja pursue Asphira. A young fan of Kai's discovers that he's given up without the help of his powers, so the boy claims that if Kai refuses to do what's right, the little guy will do it himself. Concerned for the safety of the young lad, Kai follows him into battle. Little Jake here is a great call to action for Kai, and after using his smarts to turn on the fire extinguishers and vanquish Asphira's goons, Kai realizes that he was able to save the day without using his powers. More on this arc later though. In the next episode, we get some more fantastic animated action, a very clear strength from this new animation studio, and then we get to see the return of the Serpentine very briefly, another great callback to earlier seasons. Nice to see that they're still around. The writers throw in a really fun moment where the team is led to believe that the treacherous deceiver is in fact Garmadon, who has been missing since the end of March of the Oni. However, this fun little recognition of the character is quickly flipped on its head as we find out that the treacherous deceiver is in fact Wu. I remember being shocked at this revelation, which is always a trademark of great twists in my eyes. I really remember being on edge all week waiting for the next episode to explain things. Of course, the next episode delivered on its expectations and gifted us all with a full-length 11-minute flashback to Wu and Garmadon's youth. I went over the concept of Wu's betrayal to Asphira here, and why I believe it to be a valid reason for her anger, but I want to quickly point out a few other things that make this episode great. We get more development and screen time for the mysterious and rarely seen first Spinjitzu master. We get a glimpse at the creation of the Forbidden Spinjitzu Scrolls. We're given a peek into Wu and Garmadon's youth and their bond as brothers before Garmadon's inevitable fall to the dark, and finally we get an early look at the Serpentine before the Great War. A lot of folks have complained that the whole idea of Wu hiding secrets about his past from the ninja has been worn thin, but let's really think about this here. Wu went against his father's wishes, angered and betrayed an ancient witch, and almost became the very reason for an early war between humans and Serpentine. Clearly, he feels a lot of shame towards these actions, and rightfully so. What he did here goes against a lot of what he's taught his pupils, so keeping this from them makes total sense in my eyes. Upon finding this out, the team is justifiably shocked and angered by Wu's actions. Kai himself is notably the most upset out of the bunch, and judging from the fact that he lost his powers because of this whole situation, his emotions make perfect sense. Trying to make things right, Wu asks to face Asphira alone in order to pay for his mistakes. Kai sees that Wu is truly remorseful and even willing to risk his own life to make things right, so he forgives his master and stands beside him. Great little one-episode arc for the Red Ninja here. The next episode is yet another one that folks have called filler, but the Explorers Club is genuinely one of my favorites in this whole first chapter. This one has so much fun banter between Lloyd, Nia, and Zane, a trio we rarely see any real interaction between. We get some great humor from their antics, but what I really like is the single moment of seriousness. Each of them look into an artifact called the Mirror of Dread, a relic that shows you your greatest fear. Lloyd sees his father in the mirror, Nia sees herself as mundane and weak, and Zane sees himself as ones and zeros. Love this little character building moment. From here, the antics continue as a plethora of different insects are released from the creature room as the team tries to fend off the club's security. Finding the scroll they were looking for, the three ninja depart the venue, leaving all inside in a hilarious disarray. Vengeance is Mine is the penultimate episode of this first chapter, with Asphira breaking into the monastery for a final battle against the fully reunited team. Conjuring up a massive burst of energy, she sends it straight at Wu, thinking she'll finally get her revenge. In an attempt to save his master, Zane jumps in front of the blast, sacrificing himself for Wu. In the season finale, A Cold Goodbye, we come to learn that Zane wasn't destroyed. Instead, the blast banished him to the most desolate realm in existence, the Neverrealm. I was super happy to see the introduction of a new realm here for the first time since SOG, and this leaves on the perfect cliffhanger to lead into the Ice chapter. I much prefer the creativity and adventure of the Ice chapter, however, I really love the Fire chapter for what it is. It's a fun and simple reintroduction to the team as they struggle to adjust to a world post-Oni trilogy. There's a ton of great banter and character building moments between the team, and getting some insight into Wu's youth does wonders for his character. Asphira isn't the best villain by any means, but she serves her purpose well. We begin the Ice chapter with the ninja arriving in the Neverrealm, unaware that the traveler's tea they brought with them is unable to guide their way home. Not only are the ninja supposedly stranded, but we also come to discover that Zane has been imprisoned by an evil emperor who rules over this desolate realm. I think it's safe to say that the stakes are pretty high right now. We get some really great world building for this new realm upon meeting a village of farmers struggling to survive amongst the rule of this tyrannical emperor. We're given our first glimpse at this evil emperor to end this first episode, as he orders his general to destroy the newcomers in his realm. We get a pretty sweet battle between the ninja and Blizzard samurai, as Wildbrain continues to flex their incredible fighting animations. Kai's arc comes to a close in the following episode, Firemaker, where he learns that true power is never lost. In a moment of selflessness, he once again tries using his powers to create a fire to warm the village. Having already overcome his doubts from his powerlessness, his power does return to him to save the lives of this freezing village. Kai is definitely a highlight from Season 11 for me. Nia's arc in the Ice chapter is very similar to Kai's, as us old-time fans are reminded of Season 5 when she was easily upset by her lack of power. This time, she's unable to use her water powers as everything in the realm is ice and snow, and much like Kai, embarks on a journey to overcome this notion and realizes that again, true power is never lost. Lloyd meets perhaps the best character in this chapter, Akita, whilst on the lookout for Zane by himself. Akita is a fantastic catalyst for Lloyd to update the audience on his trauma from the Oni trilogy, as he discusses Harumi's betrayal and his father's rule as emperor. It's clear that Lloyd has pushed a lot of his hurt down where he can't think about it, and is clearly too scared to discuss it in front of the team. You never really get over something like that, and knowing that Lloyd is still working through this is some really great development. Like I mentioned earlier, I love this season dearly, but I'm also not afraid to point out some of its flaws. Episode 19, aptly named the absolute worst, chooses to focus on a villain side quest in Ninjago City that has zero direct impact on the actual plot that's been developing in the Neverrealm. I genuinely couldn't tell you why this episode exists, because literally nothing changes by the end of the episode. Ultraviolet, Fugidove, and the mechanic break out of Cryptarium, goof around, and then quickly get rearrested and locked back up in prison. So everything that occurred was completely irrelevant. The Kaiju Protocol is an episode that's often thrown in the same bunch as the absolute worst and Snake-Tastrophe, with many folks crowning it as one of the worst episodes in the entire franchise. For a while, I too agreed with this to a certain extent. I did always love the distinct stylization of Ninjago City in this one, and the kaiju battle between the Preeminent and Samurai Mech was beautifully animated, but the story never really worked for me. That is, until a video from a friend of mine, Krusty783, popped up in my recommended while doing research for this video. He made a full breakdown on why the Kaiju Protocol doesn't break canon, and I encourage you all to go check it out for a more in-depth look. For this, I'll just keep things concise and summarize his points. Firstly, the only reason Wu is able to access the Departed Realm is because the tea he had was specifically brewed by an Oni. Much like the Oni masks had the power to reach the Departed Realm, it's fair to assume that Traveler's tea brewed by one could have the same effect. This episode is also a great one for Wu, who struggles with the guilt of Zane's disappearance and his lack of faith towards his students. This episode sparks a change in his mindset. By the end of the episode, Wu now believes that his ninja team is capable of finding their way home. This is after Pixel proves her value as a ninja and samurai herself. Really great growth for Wu here. Coming back to Akita, Lloyd has become very fond of his newfound canine companion, feeling like this is the only being he can trust his trauma with because she actually can't speak back to him and spread it around. Upon getting injured, Akita shapeshifts back to her human form, and we discover that she is a Formling, a being capable of shapeshifting between their respective animal and human forms. Lloyd is initially angered by this, feeling like he was deceived and had his trust broken. He starts to storm away in anger, but quickly stops when he realizes that Akita can't make it on her own with her injury. He chooses to stay back with her, and this is when Akita shares her story and why she refused to trust Lloyd until she properly knew him. This entire next episode, the last of the Formlings, brings a lot of emotion into this story and is beautifully animated in hand-drawn 2D fashion. Seeing Lego minifigures expressed in a more lifelike, yet still notably cartoonish animation is really cool to me and adds a lot of life to this story. The Ice Emperor's General Vex was once a resident himself of the Formlings clan, but was mocked by his tribe when unable to find his animal form. We'll come back to his connection with Zane and the Ice Emperor. Either way, two young Formlings, Akita and her brother Kataru, embark on a centuries-old tradition to find their animal form. After they both unlock theirs, they return home to find their entire village destroyed and frozen over by Vex and the Emperor. Akita's entire family, including her brother Kataru, succumb to the icy prison. Seeking revenge against the Ice Emperor, Akita continues with Lloyd in his quest to find the Forsaken Castle. Aside from Akita, we're introduced to another new character in this Forsaken realm, Crag the Yeti. Much like Akita's, Crag's story is one of great tragedy. His entire family was slain by the Ice Emperor, and now he spends his time watching over their graves and chasing away anyone who might disturb them. Cole crosses paths with this devastated creature, and after quickly realizing that Crag was only defending the graves of his loved ones, makes peace with the Yeti. I didn't realize how tragic Crag's backstory was until watching back through this season. He's clearly a very goofy and joyful creature at heart, and doesn't get to show this side of his personality until later on in the season when he becomes friends with Cole. Wanting to help his newfound friend and avenge his family at the same time, Crag assists in Cole's mission and leads him to the Traveler's Tree, a tree with leaves capable of sending the ninja home. Part of their problem has now been solved. Next, we're given backstory on how Vex manipulated Zane and used the power of the Forbidden Scroll to corrupt him and transform him into the Ice Emperor. This is yet another huge twist for the audience, and something this season definitely delivered on. Lloyd, desperate to get his friend back, pleads with the Emperor, but to no avail. Zane is gone, and only the Ice Emperor remains. After this first shocking revelation, we're quickly met with another. Zane reveals that he has ruled over this realm for many decades, signifying that time works differently in the Neverrealm, which is another very cool tidbit of world building. Seeing her chance, Akita attempts to stab Zane and take revenge for her people, but the Emperor quickly defeats her and freezes her, just like he did to the entirety of her people. With Lloyd knocked down, Zane attempts to go for the kill, but suddenly stops upon hearing the word protect. He is reminded that his initial programming is to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Love this callback to seasons 1 and 3 here, and this is a really cool way to communicate him remembering things and being freed from the power of the scroll. Now, he drops the scroll and frees everyone in the realm, and it's no longer frozen over. With Zane back and the realm freed, the ninja finally return home. Lloyd parts ways with Akita, and they share a somber goodbye together. After all, they had bonded together over their shared traumas, something that neither individual had ever shared with anyone else. After Lloyd's departure, we'll get what is personally one of my favorite quotes from the entire show. It alludes to the idea that the two will meet up one day again, bringing in the idea of destiny present throughout this entire show. Since time in the Neverrealm works differently though, Akita is most likely dead by now. But, as she says, never is a very, very long time to not see someone. Perhaps she awaits Lloyd in the departed realm. And just like that, we've covered the entirety of Season 11. I tried to explain my reasoning behind liking a lot of the main elements in this season as best as I could. I think Kai and Wu were big standouts in the Fire chapter. I loved seeing the effects of the Oni trilogy on the team, and getting another glimpse into Wu's childhood is always great. Lloyd and Akita's relationship in the Ice chapter was the standout for me there. It was cool to see Lloyd finally open up about his trauma to someone, and it's something he hasn't really done since. I genuinely think Akita helped Lloyd to begin to heal. Nia's arc, although very similar to Kai's, is a great callback to Season 5 and makes a ton of sense for her character. The whole concept of the Neverrealm is super fascinating to me and is perhaps my favorite new element of the entire season. A realm so barren, desolate, and separated from the others is a really cool concept, and its ability to trap you there really adds to the stakes. The whole idea of time passing differently, too, adds a lot of mystery to the realm, and getting a glimpse into these different beings, like the Formlings and the Yetis, that live there was super unique. This season has some of the best world building from the entire show for me. I do want to quickly point out that my biggest gripe with the entirety of this season is how the Ice Emperor was handled. I love the idea of Zane becoming a villain, and I think his transformation and mysterious buildup were all handled super well. However, his resolution is where some issues arise. I really think we should have seen some sort of consequence for Zane for what he did. Keep in mind that he engulfed this realm in an eternal winter, killed and terrorized local tribes, and tyrannically sat on the throne for decades. Zane should have given some time, whether it be at the end of this season or at the beginning of the next, to grapple with the fact that he ruined the lives of countless people. His army was responsible for the murder of Crag's entire family, for God's sake. I think that's more of an issue with Prime Empire, because throwing in Zane's arc of overcoming this at the very end of a season would not feel like a complete ending. It's something they could have left as a bit of a cliffhanger to build on for the next season. Something I did over on Instagram was throw up a prompt for all of my followers to answer to. They left me their reasons for either liking or disliking Season 11. A lot of people commented on the fact that this season was mostly filler and that the fire chapter was useless, and I want to respond to some of these. First of all, I have to say I totally disagree with those notions. We got a look into Wu's childhood and how Ninjago operated in the early days of its inception. Kai got a really great arc that tied in with the whole idea of power never being truly lost, which is one of my favorite messages from this entire era. We also got to explore with how the ninja dealt with everything that happened post-Oni trilogy, and I think their state of mind makes total sense. Also, a lot of the so-called filler in this season featured a lot of great character moments between our heroes. The Explorers Club, for example, gave us an insight into Lloyd, Nia, and Zane's greatest fears, and we got to see how each of them reacted to different problems presented throughout the episode. Someone mentioned that the whole season should have just been the Ice chapter, and while I certainly agree that more time exploring the Neverrealm would have been nice, we also would have missed out on Kai and Wu's stories, as well as the world building with the Forbidden Desert, Explorers Club, and newspaper episodes. Getting reintroduced to Nelson, Dareth, Gale Gossip, and the Serpentine were all huge inclusions for fan-favorite characters as well, so I appreciate that. Taking all that into account, I'm personally very glad that the Fire chapter exists, even if it does have some flaws. Someone else mentioned that they disliked the 11-minute format for episodes, and this is a concept that has been argued to death, but I'll quickly give my take on it. At this point in time, we had received exactly 100 episodes from Ninjago in the form of 22 minutes each. The 11-minute format was a very welcome change to me personally. It allowed for more shorter and concise storytelling and gave the creators more room to do unique and unusual concepts in one-off episodes. Some of them worked fabulously, like the beautifully animated and emotional Last of the Formlings, and then some of them were complete flops and added absolutely nothing to the story, like the absolute worst. I really felt like the team here was trying to bring a fresh taste to this franchise. While it wasn't perfect, I really liked getting something different with Season 11. I want to finish with a comment that summarizes my thoughts on this season. Josh Mania 2023 captured this perfectly. He said that he loved Season 11 for its new and vibrant take on the world of Ninjago. And just like that, that'll bring this discussion on Secrets of the Forbidden Spinjitzu to a close. Even if I didn't change your perspective on the season as a whole, I hope I was at least able to make you think about it in a more positive light. This one is difficult to discuss because it's arguably the most hated season alongside Crystallize, but I tried to cover everything the fans had stated was wrong with it and give my reasons for loving it personally. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please like, comment, and subscribe. It would mean the world to me and it helps the channel out a ton. Stay tuned for more videos coming very soon, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.